Ladies and gentlemen, again, good morning from Nairobi. I'm happy to have you on this session and a very warm welcome to the Linkage webinar on this day on the 24th July 2020. My name is Steve Mambo and I'll be the host for the day. On this webinar, we want to discuss a growing trend in the industry of outsourcing cybersecurity services, and more so during this period of the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of organizations are now promoting remote working. Majority of staff are working from home. And this brings in an interesting challenge in terms of managing cybersecurity for the organization. So today we want to break down that topic and that new avenue for organizations managing cybersecurity. So our guest today will address the topic. We'll try and demystify what is managed security services, what benefits can organizations get from managed services, what options should the organization also be seeking when they engaging managed security service providers. In the meantime, please connect with us on LinkedIn. The links will be shared on the chat section. Some bits of housekeeping. You have any questions or need some clarification, kindly drop that on the chat. Again, also feel free to share any information or link to knowledge resources regarding the topic on the chat section. In case of any technical hitches on our end during the webinar, please be patient and stick around while we hustle to sort them out. We hope none happens. And before we continue with today's session, last week we had a very interesting discussion on women in technology. A very interesting discussion hosted by our very own Lisa Cherono, who was joined in by also great ladies who are making a positive impact in the industry within the East African region. That recording is available on our YouTube channel. We'll be sharing it in the link chat section. Right, so we're good to go. So let's get into today's talk, and before we go further, I'd like first to introduce our panel, and I'll start with our guest all the way from Niger, Mr. Sandy McDison. Kindly take a few minutes just to introduce yourself before we go into the topic.
I love that you say, yeah. Good morning. It's morning right here. Thank you very much for having me on the call. I'm Sandy McDixon Samuel, and I'm the CEO of SM Sam Systems, a Pan-African cybersecurity firm. And we've been around for 12 years now, and we help organizations across the continent and across the world, to prevent breaches, on their structure. And more details about us can be gleaned on our website, smsam.net. I'm happy to, and it's an honor also. So let's see how the conversation goes. And I believe at the end of the day, both of us will leave here positive with knowledge, but manage security services, and also how we can help folks around us to secure the infrastructure in this COVID-19 pandemic era. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, Sandy, and it's great to have you here on this webinar. Felix, kindly do the same.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Felix. I'm a security analyst at TL Bridges. And I'm also happy to be here, especially with Sunday. A lot of conversations go around monitoring services right now, because I think IT is one of the fields that have not been affected heavily by COVID-19. We know that some professions right now are really not working, but I think in the IT security space, that has become one of the conversation that is making rounds on either do we have a SIM, do we have a managed service. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I hope to interact very well with you guys. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, gentlemen. And I'll quickly start off with just assisting our participants understand what's your understanding of managed security service. And Felix, I'll start with you because you've just hinted on a few points. What's your understanding of managed security service?
Managed security service comes in. I will look at it in this point. It's a service that it's a security service where any organization puts in place, where you as the organization are not the only people looking at the security perspective of that specific device. So there's you, and then there's another person probably who is an expert in the same, looking at the same device and managing the security for your organization. So when we talk about managed security service, we are looking at someone else managing your or a company's security concerns. Like, for example, many organizations normally buy different security devices. So you have a firewall, you have an IPS or an IDS, that is intrusion prevention system or intrusion detection system. You have a SIEM, you have either a SOAR or anything. Most of those security devices, you put them in your organization, and then you get to hire someone to manage these specific devices that you've bought. But now in a managed security service kind of a scenario, you bring in one device, and then yes, you may get someone to either look at the security internally within the organization, but the bigger chunk of the work is done by someone else. And this is where this is the beauty about managed security service, because someone else who is already experienced, who is an expert in this service, gets to look at the security. So does the configuration, does the monitoring, does most of the other things that if you had to hire someone within the organization, you'll have to hire maybe 5 different people. But now this managed security service comes down and just makes you not hire 5 or 10 different people, but just one. But the security team behind the managed devices makes you even makes the whole now the whole ecosystem of your security as a company to be more holistic and even much better. So that is my understanding of managed security service.
Very, very well, Felix. And you've raised quite a number of interesting points that will actually guide our conversations as we move along. Mr. Sandy, do you have some insights that you wish to add on before I start throwing in some interesting questions?
All right, that's great. So when it comes to managed security services, we have a little bit different perspective. Okay, though not far, from what Felix has already put forward. But here's the point. You ask yourself, why do I need the late preacher, what's his name now? This guy from the Caribbean, Miles Monroe. He said something when the I'm trying to get the exact word he used. He said, when the definition of the thing is not well understood, then abuse is inevitable. When the purpose of a thing is not well understood or defined, then abuse is inevitable. Why do you need a managed security services? You need a managed security service because you don't want to end up in the news for the wrong reason. You want to be hacked. That's where you need managed security services. Now, there are many different types of security services that we have. Basically, I categorize them into 2 buckets. You have the hybrid model, and you also have the fully, the fully fledged model, by my word. The fully fledged is for organizations that, look, they're scared of ending up for the wrong reason. They do not have that resources internally to do it. So they outsource 100% to a third party. And that fits in exactly what Felix, explained a while ago. But what about the hybrid model? The hybrid model is where an external party, like Yale Bridges, we work with the internal team of the organization. And the external party, they are much more advanced, they are much more knowledgeable in terms of resource to help the guys. So for instance, I'm not going to expect a bank, financial services, insurance company to have a fully fledged managed. It's not recommended because you have to look from the security perspective. You cannot outsource everything out. And my idea is once you have an internal IT team, either it's 1% or 2%, then the best bet to go is the hybrid model so that you can work with the folks who are internal and be able to, implement an appropriate framework that will help you to deliver the mission of you don't want that organization to end up in the news for the wrong reason. So if you're either the hybrid model or 100% outsourced model, as a cybersecurity practitioner, you must have a framework that there is no rule that says I have to be to Kenya before I can come to Kenya. All I need to do is a compass. All I need to do is to get my flight details. Then details will tell me where to avoid and all that stuff in the flight plan. The same thing also with the managed security services. Once you're going to offer these services, irrespective of either, again, is hybrid or the fully 100% outsourced, you need that manual that tells you how do I want to achieve what I want to achieve. And there's a whole lot of conversation around, do you need a SIM, do you need a this, do you need a that? Okay, it's part of the conversation that we're going to have today, which we have a different take on that, because like I said, the main objective why you need these managed security services is you want to stop a breach. You don't want this company that you're working for to end up in the news for the wrong reason. How do you do that? That's part of the stuff we're going to discuss. So from my perspective, that is what a managed cybersecurity should entail. Is it fully outsourced? Is it hybrid model? Either of the two? What is the framework you have to deliver the mission? You don't just want to be monitoring stuff. You want to make sure that the breach doesn't happen. Thank you.
Very well, Sandy, and thanks for bringing out the two insights regarding having that framework and being able to decide whether to go with a hybrid model or a fully fledged model. That comes very interesting because there's always that assumption that once we've outsourced our cybersecurity, the MSSP or whichever company has been offered that service is fully responsible for our cybersecurity. But of course, from your insight, we can tell, yes, that of course may not be right because of course there are some responsibility. The organization, the client has to take up some accountability. And yes, as they outsource to that third party, there is the element that there are some responsibilities that fall to that third party. Now, that takes us to a very interesting conversation. Now, we assume I'm this client who wants to take up this service. We've had, there's a hybrid model, there's a fully fledged model. So what are some of the factors or internal considerations that drive that decision on which model to go to? Sandy, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you very much. Great point there. So the core that would determine that is, what is the head count of this organization? What is the head count? For, again, what verticals do they work in? Are they banking? Are they financial services? Are they manufacturing? Are they this? 2. Number 3, do they have an internal team? Do they have an internal IT team? I'm not talking about security now. Do they have an internal IT team? For instance, do they have somebody who manages their server? Somebody who manages firewall? If they have an internal security team, it's a massive plus. But they don't need to. But if they do, it's a massive plus. So you begin to look at these factors. Okay, do they have internal, even the core, do they have internal IT team? So if you have internal IT team and I'm my security provider, then I'm going to propose the hybrid model. Because, like I've always said, you cannot send humans to do machines' job. Meaning, you cannot depend only on monitoring platforms to secure the organizations. Remember, the core objective of this is to prevent a breach and not to stop a compromise. These are two different things. You can be compromised and not be breached, but you cannot be breached and not be compromised. And the main mission of the adversary is a breach. Look at it this way. I'm married, I got 3 kids. The main mission of getting married, amongst others, the main is to have babies. Before my wife get delivered of those babies, she has to be pregnant. Okay, so when she was pregnant, I was excited, but my excitement cannot be compared with when I had my babies in my hand. So for me, the objective, the main mission is the delivery of those babies. The same thing too to the adversaries. Their objective is to make sure they make you to end up in the news for the wrong reason. You've been hacked. They got what they're looking for. But before you get hacked, you first have to be compromised, because they need to get a way into the network, either phishing, either exploiting vulnerabilities on the internet-facing applications, either paying somebody internally to do stuff, whatever, you have to be compromised. So the focus here should not be, how do I stop the compromise? There's really nothing you can do. The best you can do is to frustrate, disrupt, irritate the bad guys at compromising you. They will do that. But once you are able to reduce this attack surface, then you have a better chance to stop them from achieving the main objective, which is a breach. And there is no way you can stop a breach by just offering a full-fledged managed security services for organizations that has, for organizations rather that have internal IT team. So you, as the external security provider, you have to interface with someone who's on ground. All right, you have to define the role to say, okay, this is what you guys have right now. This is where you're going. And based on our, you have the immediate resort, you have the short-term resort, you have the long-term resort, because we want to make a relationship that lasts for forever, something like that. So we are bringing that value. Okay, so maybe after 2-year contract that we sign, because the value we have delivered, we can even say, look, why not give these guys 5 years? They have delivered because we've not had a breach, not a compromise. Remember, the compromise is not a big deal. It's not what the adversaries really need. It's the breach, but they have to do the compromise first. What you do alone is to monitor. The breach has happened. So what are you monitoring? And this is the pain I have with the SIEM. Okay, because and we can have this discussion separately, but I've seen a lot of this to people. A SIEM alone will not prevent the breach for you. It's an aftermath. It has happened. So why do I want to wait for something to happen when I actually have the capacity to make sure it didn't happen? And how do you do that if you have the symbiotic relationship with somebody who is internal? So if, again, the firm, organization here has an internal IT team, the best bet is to go for hybrid model. So everybody will define what we do. But if they don't, then it's your responsibility when signing the contract to say, okay, this is the risk that you are able to take. I'm not going to take this particular risk. Okay? You have to define that. Make sense?
Very well, Sandy, and very, very interesting analogy. I like the analogy that the adversary is waiting to hold that baby in their hands. It's not the process of getting there. Whether it's compromised, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day is how can you stop that risk? The compromise at the end of the day, you could spend all your time, all the resources that you have trying to fight that, but you're wasting your resources in the wrong direction. Back to the topic of managed security. You've also brought a very interesting component of skill sets in terms of does the organization also have an entity? And I would wish, Felix, if you could also I know you probably might have other different points to add on, but what do you think about the skill sets? And also, if you could try and focus more within the African space, you've been involved in a number of countries, engaging them on cybersecurity. What's your take on terms of skill set?
All right, thank you very much, Steve, for that. Sunday, you have some very interesting insights on the same. But let me first of all start commenting on the skill set that we have within Africa. And within the different engagements we've had, we've seen that there's a need for more skill sets in terms of security, but we have almost enough, but the people who are there are really not keen on some of the basics. So you'll find that we have at least people who understand what they are doing in the space, but most of the other people really don't understand. So you'll find that before a compromise happens or before a breach happens, they are really being more kind of reactive because they did not know what to look for. And this is where I think the conversation about managed security service is coming in, because you see, for a company, when they want to hire a talent, they will look for specific qualifications, but most of these specifications or qualifications that they're looking for, most of them are just in paper. Most of them have not been practiced. And when now you give them the job or the role to do this, yes, they do have the qualifications and the papers to show that they have the capability to do that. But then on the real ground, on the scenario itself, they are not capable of working through some of these security devices or gadgets that have been put in place. And you'll find that most of them are becoming reactive. They are realizing that something has already happened, so we need to act to it. And it's because some of the organization, well, they've invested in things like SIM, where SIM is mostly collects and then gives you details of what has already happened, not stopping them at the point of the compromise, and they become more reactive rather than stopping it before it happens. So the skill set within Africa, number one, it's wanting, and number two, we need people who are always on the job. And with most of the organizations that we've engaged, you find that the IT team are the same people who are tasked with the security job, which is ideally not supposed to be the case, because the IT team, they still have to handle other concerns like making sure the systems are working, the help desk is working, responding to other concerns within the organization. So basically, their mind is not just focusing on the security perspective of the organization. And this is where most of the organizations now need to really look into separating the two departments. There needs to be an IT department, they need to be a security department, where the security department mainly focuses on the sole work for securing the organization. And with that, then I think for the organizations or the companies that are looking towards having a more in-depth kind of a security perspective, that is the way to go for them. And this is where now managed security comes into play, because most of the companies, they really won't look into having two different departments. They want to have an IT department that overlooks everything. And if the company now comes in and probably looks into putting in security managed service, then at least they have outsourced that bit of security to another external party that is looking towards the security of the company 24/7. And then they will be having the support of the IT department within the company to look into any other, and then any other concern within the technology perspective, but the security is being looked entirely, not entirely 100%, but at least 90 or 95% of the security of that organization is being looked by these other that party that they brought on board. So my my thinking about the skill set within Africa is that one, we need to have one that is just, a person just needs to, or the company, they need to have a department that one just looks at a specific part. If it's security, it's security. If it's IT, and not any other thing. Number two, we need to grow the skill set within Africa. And that is why you've seen a lot of people coming up with trainings, awareness, and all these, so that they can upgrade the skill set. But at the end of it all, the papers really don't reflect what a person is capable of, but rather the skill that they can be able to do for the organization.
Very well, Felix. And when we're discussing about that, I'm just thinking about the SME, the small and medium enterprise in Africa. It's good, yes, that they have that the resources to hire individuals responsible for IT and cybersecurity. Well and good. But when you think of our SMEs who mainly run the African economy, that may not be a possibility. You think also that cost is also a contribution factor why a lot of organizations are considering going towards a managed security service? And if at all that's the case, is it a cost efficient model? And if not, probably what would you advise organizations to consider?
Definitely. Hiring one security analyst, it does not come in cheap. So you probably pay them, let's say, in terms of Kenyan currency, you may be paying these people almost 200,000 shillings for a person to sit there to be a security analyst. So if you're looking at the different layers of security within the organization, you may be looking at probably hiring at around 5, or let's say 2 to 5 people within the organization. That's around $1 million a month for just the workforce itself. So it becomes a bit more costly for an organization to hire people to do the job. So most of the time you'll find that they are just hiring one person to do all the 5 people's job. And that makes the person to have fatigue in doing the job. And then Sandy mentioned that you cannot hire a person to do a machine's job. And that is why we cannot substitute a person to do automatic detection. That is a machine's job. They do the automatic detection. But then we do not overlook the fact that we cannot bring in a system to do a person's job. There is something that correlations and making connections and all this. There's a perspective that people need to come in. So we cannot also overlook the fact that people need to be part of the whole ecosystem. And the part where the whole ecosystem, to complete the whole ecosystem of the security perspective, we need to be looking at both technology and people. So for SMEs, if they look at if they want to hire people, they look at the cost perspective. Well, that is the bottom line for every organization. They will look at how much do we need to invest in people, because people bring in the perspective of, number one, salary, incentives. You need also to train them. So people becomes even a more higher cost for any SME. So that is why most of them are now looking towards, can we try and outsource this service? Just have one person within the organization, or 2 or less, and then these people within the organization, we can then outsource this service of security, and then this outsourced party can be able to train these people. So the cost perspective comes into play, and that is why most of the SMEs right now, they are looking at, can we outsource this service of security? Can we have a managed security? Can we have a third-party person looking at our security, so that we cut down on the cost of how much we need to spend or invest in terms of all the security devices or the security layers that we need to put in place. And if you're an SME and you are looking towards either looking for talent, you'll find that you will invest more on the talent itself rather than seeing the return on investment. And that is where most of these SMEs are looking towards having a third party or a managed security service. I've seen a lot of calls from the beginning of this year, a lot of calls for people who are offering managed security services, because they've realized that at the end of it, our managed security service offer, they are way much cheaper than hiring the skills, and not just cheaper, but it brings in the perspective of, we are not responsible for the whole security perspective of the company. There's someone else taking care of that. And if you look at the security triangle for how people tend to, or organizations tend to push risk, you can either accept the risk, you can push the risk to someone else, or you can, the normally three. So you can either mitigate the risk yourself, you can let another person handle the risk for you, or you can share the risk between the two parties. So most of the people are looking towards sharing the risk, pushing the risk to another person so that someone else can look at that. And it's the whole orchestration of the whole thing. Right now, people are moving to the cloud. Why are people moving to the cloud? Because they are not looking towards investing in hardware within the organization. Now, the hardware on the cloud makes it simple for people to host their services there. So everything is going to a cloud perspective, or something as a service. So infrastructure as a service, security as a service, everything is a service right now. So if you're really not keen on looking at something as a service, then you are going to have a lot of investments to do as a company.
Thank you, Felix. Sandy, would you want to jump in with a comment or some interesting insights?
Okay, great. Felix, thank you very much for that. I put down some note right here, and this is the whole idea about this conversation. Felix talks about, okay, you first asked the question about, why these organizations are actually considering MSSP or MSP or MDR, or whatever name you want to call it. You see, for SMEs, we're focusing on SME here. There's a lot of factors that, propelled these guys to say, look, we cannot do this on our own. And just like Felix has brilliantly put it, we have the cost implication there. They don't have the budget. And even big guys too, they don't have the budget, because see, we're talking about a threat landscape that is polymorphic, that is fluid. Okay, according to various reports, you see hundreds of thousands of malwares released per day, something like that. And for the fact that you're an organization that you have an internet presence, you have internet, you're a potential victim. And even when you now, as an organization, holds very important data, you become a prime potential victim. So SMEs, they don't have the budgets to buy all these layers kind of security. It doesn't really work. They don't have the people. It's there because they don't have the budget to even hire these people. And this is where, once we are going in as an MSSP provider or an MSS provider, I talked about a framework, that you should have a framework to say, how am I going to deliver the mission? Because it's either you are 200 users or 200,000 users, you should have access to the same security, because nobody want to end up in use for the wrong reason. You could be 20 users, you could be 2,000 users. You just want to prevent a breach. That is the idea. Now, for SMEs, and preventing that breach, again, like Felix said, which he quoted me to say, you cannot send humans to do machines' job. Agree. You cannot also replace, machines with human stuff. Okay, agree. But because of the fluidity of the threat landscape, machine would do at least 90 or 80% of the job. And human will just need to do, need to focus on what matters. And this is where you have stuff like the AI, the ML. Okay, so a lot of vendors, they throw around these words, but we try to let the people understand. If I'm bringing an AI-based platform in your organization, you have to look. Is it machine learning? Is it deep learning? Is it supervised machine learning? Is it unsupervised? In that case, I'm going to use your data to train the algorithm to do what it needs to do. So it's a whole lot of stuff around it. However, to break it down, we always encourage that SMEs should embrace the security platform approach rather than the security solutions approach. In the security solutions approach, you have to buy and buy and buy and buy a lot of solutions, because right now you have a lot of layers that you have to build on. Remember, you don't have the budgets, you don't have the people, okay? So for the platform approach is you get a technology that delivers the value of multiple technologies in one. This again is similar to what UTM does. But the difference between a UTM and a security platform is this. With a UTM, there is a primary function of that technology. Take, for instance, a firewall that has a UTM capability. It can do antivirus, it can do web filtering, it can do IPS, it can do a lot of this stuff. But it was built primarily to do firewall. So if you have a lot of load on the firewall aspect of it, every other modules, they take secondary, they take backseat. But our security platform, every of those features were built together. So there is no primary feature in a security platform. There is no primary. Every feature it offers, they offer that apart. So you see, you have a solution, for instance, that can do a SIEM, but this SIEM now is not the reactive type of SIEM. It's a SIEM that can detect and respond on its own. That means you have a SIEM that has a SOAR in it. You have a SIEM that also gives you some aspect of vulnerability management. So instead of you to buy a tool for vulnerability management, this SIEM comes with that module for you. You have a theme, for instance, file integrity monitor. You have EDR. You have a whole lot of these features that is offered in this single solution. That is what the SME requires, because remember, they don't have the money, they don't have the people to manage a stack of security tools. So by the time you have a security platform, you're actually also resolving the personnel problem. Because instead of you to buy like 4, 5, 6 different tools, which you will need 5, 6 different interfaces, 5, 6 different supports, maybe 3 or 4 people, with a security platform, just one technology, one person. So you have reduced the cost. You have reduced the amount that you're going to put in the training of the personnel, and much more importantly, you have reduced the mean time to detect, the mean time to respond. Now I have one interface to see everything I'm looking at. It is easier to spot easily and to respond easily than me trying to look at many, GUIs to try to solve the problem. SMEs doesn't have that, they don't have that budget. So again, we say there is a need to bring in the right technology. I've had this conversation. People say, "Oh, sorry, you talk about technology as if it's just the all in all." Well, that's not. I'm not saying there's a silver bullet technology, but with the appropriate technology, you can solve the problem of cybersecurity. And what's up? How do you solve it? You disrupt, you slow down, you frustrate, you irritate the bad guys continuously. And once you're able to do that, they either leave you alone or they make errors that force your platform to pick them up. So that is it, because all you want to do is to prevent that breach. How do you prevent the breach? Whatever you do, it's okay. Sometimes about 2 years ago, there's a commission in America that says any organization that have been hacked, they should also hack back. And all hell was loose. They were like, "Oh, how can you hack back? Is it lawful? Is it something?" And folks were saying, when I end up in the news for the bad reason and my stock price is pummeled down, is that lawful? And you were saying I should not respond back to these adversaries. Okay, why not? Shouldn't I be able to respond and have a deterrent for any other groups that will attempt to come at me? So any ways you can stop this breach is lawful, because these other guys, they don't play to the rule. They don't play to the rule. There's no lawful compromise. There's no lawful breaches. So, and for us here, and my own plan and my own mission is to make sure, I always say that I want to disrupt, I want to slow down, I want to frustrate, I want to irritate these adversaries continuously and automatically. Okay, so with a security platform, your costs come down. The cost of technologies, the cost of the people, and the processes. Your process becomes streamlined. Okay, so for instance, if I don't have a 24/7 SOC and I have a security platform that can respond on my behalf, why do I need to keep somebody 24/7? And I'm not only monitoring now, I'm responding with the same platform. Not, okay, I need to get NTA, I need to get SOAR, I need to get NBAT, I need to get threat intelligence, and you don't have the money. So SMEs is advisable for them to go for what we call security platform rather than security technologies, because they don't have the money, they don't have the people.
Very well put, Sandy, and I think that's a very good message going to the SMEs, and more so in terms of how to take advantage of that package, not just going to buy one specific solution. It's too expensive, they don't have a budget. And the other key critical factor is that cybersecurity is not their core business. So I think from my engagement with also clients, I see a lot of organizations spending too much resources, and resources here is not just a matter of budget, but also in terms of time, as you are saying, firefighting. Then that drags you away from your core business, which is ideally not cybersecurity. Very good. I think we are faring on so far so good. And my other question, and I think both of you have actually addressed on it a bit, is if today there's a CIO, a CISO who's a mid-distance, and they are thinking about taking up the services of managed security service provider, what questions, apart from costs that we've discussed in details, what other factors, or rather what questions should they be asking the MSSP before they sign off that contract or that SLA? Felix.
Thank you, Steve, for that. So the kind of questions that they need to ask, let me start by addressing some of the things that they should not be looking for. And I want to start by
That's a good start.
Yes, they should not be driven by what other people are doing, because if today, and this is the notion with most of the CIOs today, that they go to another company, they ask them, what firewall are you using? They tell them, I'm using a specific brand. And they go to another one, they are using another brand. Then they go to another one, they like that. So they make a decision out of what the other people are actually using. And that is not the way to go, because what worked for them will not automatically work for you. Their environment is different from your environment. And that is something that the CIOs should understand, that whatever works for them really doesn't also need to work for you. And if it works for them, well and good, maybe they have put in other measures that works for the environment. But you need, as a CIO, to understand your environment and what works for you. Number two, do not look at where have this product been cited in the famous it's called what do you call this famous thing, this ranking, Gartner.
Quadrant.
Yes. Yeah, Gartner quadrant. Has it been cited there? Has it worked for? Has it been in this? That is not a way to go for most of the CIOs. The thing is, we all know how these Gartner things work. If you have money, you can tell them to put it up there, and if you don't, well, and bad for you. But if you work or if you take up applications for your organization, depending on the Gartner's qualification, you are probably having it wrong, and you need to look for a solution that probably works for you again, but it is not out of how famous is it or how well listed is it. No, it is because of the I want to call it the reputation it has, the kind of work it does for you. That is another way that you should be looking at solutions. So now to the question of what kind of questions should you be asking as a CIO once you're taking up the managed service solutions. Number one, you should be looking for, does this solution have, well, the basics is, does it have a 24/7 monitoring? Number two, can it be configured, or can it be made in a way, or yes, can it be custom made for my environment? Because if it cannot be custom made for my own environment and how it works, then it will not be able to get most of what the security perspectives that it's supposed to be giving me, or the insight that it's supposed to be giving me. Number three, if you are approached by a person who is telling you that we have this solution and you need to take it up, you need to ask yourself one basic question. If I'm to take this solution, is it going, am I going to see a return on investment on it? Because, well, most of the security solutions out there, they normally give the return on investment for most of them out there, they are really not immediate, and you need to have a gradual kind of monitoring to see that yes, there's a return on investment. And by that, I want to use a philosophy that I have seen used a couple of times. It's called the seatbelt philosophy. In a car, you might think that a seatbelt is unnecessary, or it is not supposed to be there, basically. And well, it is relatively cheap to install a seatbelt, but it is not necessary for most of the people. If you are used to getting into public service vehicles, Okada in Nigeria, probably highly you will not wear a seatbelt once you get in. But at the point where an accident happens, that is when you see the importance of that specific seatbelt. So it is a return on investment for most of the companies, especially when they are investing into managed security service. It's not immediate, but in the long term, or when an incident is almost to happen. Remember, we say that it is not about if, it's about when in security. So when it happens, then that security solution that you're putting in will tell you that this is the amount of money that we have actually been able to save out of the compromise that has been stopped by this security solution that we put in 10 years ago. And that is how now you get to measure the kind of return on investment that you have. And I think those are the most critical, some of the questions that you should be asking as a CIO, especially when onboarding a security solution into your organization. I think, Sandy, you can add more on what I've not mentioned.
Well, great stuff there. I was just telling myself that I don't think I have that time to ask this kind of questions. I don't have the time,
Yeah.
you know, but just on the, on the soft side of things.
Mm-hmm.
For me, if I'm a CIO or I'm a CISO, the first question I will ask, and the only question I will ask, how can you help me to stay off the news for the wrong reason? How? And if the provider is saying this is how, okay, before we get into the full agreement, can you show how this will be done? And this is why we pioneered the idea of a POV and not a POC. You see, there are concepts everywhere, but the values derived from that concept is very few. Anybody can tell you anything. You see everybody throwing around all kind of words. So for me, it's like, how can you help me to stay off the news? How can, if the CISO is in Kenya, how can you help me to stay off the gossip of the Twitter platform in Kenya? How can you make sure the nation newspaper does not get us at the front story, right? And our competitors will be gloating over it. How do you, that is what I'm, that's what I'm after. And everybody will say, okay, can you prove this? Can you prove this? And you don't need years or moons to prove value. So that is for me. And that is why I always, whenever we talk to CISOs, CIOs, and all that, all those folks, we said, okay, don't take our word for it. Can we show you what we can do? Can we just show you? Okay. Of course, there are interests that, okay, this is political, whatever, it's okay. But if what you need is to stay out of the news for the wrong reason, then we have what it takes. And can we show you? And that is it. So that's the question from CISO or CIO to the potential MSSP provider. And like I said, I don't have time to ask you this, that, no. Can you prove to us how you can make sure we don't end up in the news for the wrong reason? If you go and bring the solution that is called FelixNet, that Gartner doesn't know, and it works for me, who cares? That's what I want. Okay. The Gartner point is another conversation, which I don't want to get involved here. Okay. You know, so everybody knows me. You know, those guys who knows me, they know that myself and Gartner, we have a different idea of things, you know. But okay, they're good. They're good at what they do. I'm also good at what I do. Okay. And they're, you know, everybody has, you know, their own end game. Okay. So we are different kind of. So, but I also tell people, once you say this is what you want and this is what we're proposing, can you just show me? For instance, if you say you're looking for a scene and it's taking a week or two to set up the scene, then you don't need a prophet to tell you that you're going to end up in the news much more faster than you think. Okay, if it's taking 2 weeks or 1 week to set it up, because if it does that, it shows you how am I going to manage it? How am I going to administer this and something like that? Okay, but you deliver something and it shows value. It doesn't need to take long for it to show the value. So that is my idea. I tell you, what can you do for me? You can promise heaven and earth. Okay, how do you get to the heaven? Show me now.
Mm-hmm.
Very well, Sandy. And allow me to repeat that question. How can you help me not to be in the news for the wrong reason? I think that communicates a lot of weight from the CIO to the potential MSSP. And by the fact that the MSSP is able to provide a proper answer that fits within that organization, that already would be able to tell that CIO or that organization that this provider is a right fit for my organization.
Exactly. And
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just trying to share a screen. And you see, once we ask this question, okay, no, okay, so if we are a service provider for like the Bank of Kenya, for instance, or we want to be a service provider, I'm going to tell the CIO of the Bank of Kenya, sir, I can make you not to ever end up in the news for the wrong reason. And it's like, what exactly are you talking about? I mean exactly what I'm saying. And the next question would be, how?
Oh, yes.
The how is where the methodology, the plan that you have as an MSSP will come up. Remember I said, as an MSSP, you must have a plan. Just like in a pilot who has a flight plan, you must have that plan. So by the time I show you my plan, you say, okay, this makes sense on paper. I think I have an idea what he's talking about. Now, how can we transform these? Again, come and prove. And we prove it for you. You understand? So I saw something flap up here. I don't know. Okay. So that is the idea. And we've seen, why is it that organizations are not secure? Why do you have a lot of cyber attacks coming up every now and then? Okay, just 1 second. That is this slide that we just made, but of course we're not going through that. It's just a slide. The cost of devastating cyber attacks. Those who have spent money, you see, and what if people are spending so much money and they're still getting in the news for the wrong reason? What about you that don't even have, you have not even spent 1/10 of it? And one thing we have come to realize is that from my perspective and from what I've seen in the field, these are about 10 reasons what we have seen. For instance, many organizations, they have no clue about the asset they own. So if you have no idea about the asset you own, how do you have a clue about the security you're offering? We have the unknowns. We have the known knowns, the things you know that you know. You have the known unknowns. That is to say, there are things you know that you do not know. And you have the unknowns. You have no clue. But the adversary knows that. So if as a CIO, you ask your team, how many Windows systems do we have here? I can bet you are going to get more than 2-3 different answers. The antivirus guys, they will tell you a different number. The SCCM will tell you a different number. The SIM will tell you a different number. Different solutions in the same network, tell you different thing. That's the problem. That's where the problem starts. And if you check all these frameworks, like the CIS control and all the PCI, ISO, whatever, they always say, start with understanding the asset inventory you've got, the software, the hardware, everything. If you don't even know the software you have, how can you do vulnerability management successfully? Because you also need to know. And you cannot know by looking at just one dashboard. You need a platform that connects to multiple dashboards and correlates and give you a single view. So how many people today, they have asset inventory? And you say you spend millions of dollars in firewall and SIEM and this, you see the problem. If you have Office 365 and the only security solution you have is the one Microsoft gives you, then you're going to end up faster in the news for the wrong reason. Because Microsoft solutions, no matter how advanced it is, cannot secure you end-to-end. We have what we call security of the cloud, and you have security in the cloud. Security of the cloud is the responsibility of the cloud service providers. Security in the cloud is the responsibility of the subscribers. So Steve has a property in downtown Nairobi. This property has 15 flats in it. The security of the whole properties is Steve's responsibility. The security of flat 5, which I am a tenant, it's my responsibility. So if Steve is telling me he can secure my flat and even my room and onto the gold trinket of my wife, then there's a problem. It means Steve has got access to my room, and he should not be. So that's why when Microsoft or Google comes to you and say they can secure you end-to-end, it's not true. The best they can do is to secure their infrastructure. The same way the best Steve can do is to secure the property. Okay, the flat in it, which I'm a tenant, that's where the word tenant comes from, it's my responsibility. How can Steve, as a service provider, put in policies in my tenant? Did he know how I work? Did he know my processes? Also, if you have Office 365, the only security you are having today somehow is only on email. What about OneDrive? What about SharePoint? What about Teams? People are working from home, you're sharing stuff. How do you secure comprehensively? Go to the network access. A lot of organizations today, they have far two-way access than they require. We have a tool, which maybe I will share with later, where people can run the tool. It does what we call excessive network access audits. So for instance, you can deploy this tool. There's no solution that can detect you. No, it would detect you. The tool was made with that kind of platform, with kind of idea, is to evade all kind of security. So if you run this tool, it's going to tell you how many other computers you have access to if you're coming in as a VPN. I'll give you an example. There's a bank for close to 20,000 users. And this bank, of course, they're very, very good in security. They have one of the best security you can think about in Africa. They ran this tool from a user who was connected from the VPN. Guess what? This particular user has access to 53% of the network. They were like, wait a second, that's not true. We have net segment, they have money, they do everything, but see, they run it from internal network. The same guy from the internal network has access to 8%. So see what it shows, that they are much more exposed from the VPN, which they thought they were secured. Because if you have a company of 100 users, there is no reason why the receptionist computer should be able to ping the 100 systems. There's no reason for that. Mm-hmm. There is no reason why the administrator should be able to reach all the computers. You are only allowed to reach the computers or the applications you need to do your job. So if you do that, once you are compromised, which you will be compromised, the attacker can only go as far as he can see. You don't want an attacker to come to the network and see everything. Seeing everything is a massive problem because you don't know what to do. So I don't even want him to see it. So once you run this tool, because most folks, they'll say, oh, no, we are secure with this. Okay, that's why I said POV, let's show you. And what we have shown you, what is the next thing? How do I mitigate that? That's a different story. And of course, we see burdensome management, vulnerability management solution, platform. You have scanning thousands and thousands of pages. How do you prioritize? How do you patch? It's a big problem. Is it solvable? Very easy. The most important trouble I have seen and the most neglected is the Active Directory. Active Directory controls everything. Yes, what do you have with Active Directory security? Maybe some monitoring tool or some SIEM. Come on, the bad guys has gone before you know what's going on. Remember I said there's a difference between a compromise and a breach. For a compromise to happen, the attacker requires two things. You need credentials, you need a privilege. For the breach to happen, you need a third one, which is the access. So if you got credentials, you got the privilege, let's say you got domain admin. If you are not able to access the resources, it's useless. And that is what we do. We make sure we cut off that line. And how do we cut it? Very simple. Implement a solution to say, anything you want to access on the network, you must use MFA. You must force MFA. You are connected from the VPN, you want to access the server, you must use MFA. So, because I want to know if Steve is Steve, if somebody have not stolen Steve credentials, because Steve uses a weak password or something like that. Okay, and you have a whole lot. Because of time, I don't want to go into full, but you can see one of these other is what I call lack of comprehensive and scalable SIEM. Today, when you talk about SIEM, they say, "Oh, don't cover everything. You can't send everything." Why can't you send everything? Because of licensing costs. Who told you that the log source you are monitoring is where the adversary will come in? Why not do everything? All the flows, especially all the flows on the network, you must monitor. But you cannot monitor that because the SIEM provider does not have the capacity to take those injections. It cannot ingest all the logs. It cannot ingest all the flows. So he's telling you that you have to select. Remember, there are the unknowns. How can you select that? So if you look at all of these issues, right, that we have stated, these are some of the problems we have seen, that most organizations, despite spending so much, they are still ending up in the news for the wrong reason. But there's a way that you can begin to address this problem based on who you are. Remember, I said, if I'm going to offer MSSP, what numbers? Is it a 200 user organization? Is it 2,000? What are you trying to secure and all of that? So these are the plans we cannot give to the CIOs. Okay, let's see how we begin to address this problem after the order. As we're addressing it, we're closing the gap. We're closing the gap. How are we doing that? We're making sure we keep, reducing the attack surface, thereby disrupting, slowing down, frustrating, and irritating the adversary on a continuous basis.
Very, very, very well, Sandy, and very informative. And I think the message that all of us will get from this session is, at the end of the day, and I like that the way you keep on insisting us, the target should be stop the breach. The rest about the compromise, yes, we can see what you can do, but the most important thing there is stopping the breach. And before we even go to some closing remarks, Ibrahim John is asking, how can organizations that allows users work from home?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's on the chat message.
Okay.
How can an organization prevent data dissemination when it allows users to work from home? What measures can it take to prevent data loss, especially when you consider the recently enacted laws, Data Protection Act, GDPR, or any other data-related law? Felix, you want to start off?
Okay, so
Sandy, as Felix thinks through his thoughts.
Okay, yeah. great. So this is very, okay. Again, this is a very good question. And as a matter of fact, we are addressing this with some of the folks around here right now, this particular problem. Like I said before we started the session, where we had the pre-session before the team joined. Steve, you remember? I said, yes. We are doing well in security now, amazingly, unlike before, because people now realize that security is an enabler. You just have to do security now. Why? Because the perimeter is broken. The idea of a moat and a castle is gone. Folks are working from home. Their endpoints is now the perimeter. So how do you secure the data from the organizations or the information from out, as Ephraim has just stated? Now, you can address this in two ways. if this organization is leveraging on Azure AD, Office 365, cloud applications, it's much more easier because you can implement a security solution, the group of solution called CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker. And these CASBs, they have embedded DLP platform, which means it can be deployed without installing agents on both managed and unmanaged systems. Managed means corporately given by the organizations. Unmanaged means it's just my own. It could be tablet, it could be phone, it could be whatever. Okay? So there are many, many CASBs that does that, though they offer that differently, and we have our own stuff. But I don't want to mention them here, so it's not. I see we're promoting stuff right here. But if anybody needs, information about that, after we can take that offline. But you have these CASBs that you can deploy to enforce protection. For instance, you cannot download a particular file. For instance, if you download this file, it's going to have a watermark. So if it has a watermark, the way you can use it has to be internal. If you want to send this particular mail, if it contains this particular words in it, it has to be encrypted. You cannot copy, you cannot print screen, you cannot do a lot of stuff. So you deploy this DLP at the source. So once you have deployed this at the source in this cloud applications, there's no point to deploy agents because it's at the source. Nothing is going to download in the first instance. But if this organization that allow work from home, they don't have a cloud application that everybody has to connect back to the office to get their application, then it's a no-brainer. You have to deploy agents on the computers. And that is where the problem comes up. We have a bank, a very big bank. When this work from home started, they said, okay, there's a problem right now. They realized that they want to secure folks connecting from home, blah, blah, blah. Now, how do we do it? And at that point, you say, okay, we have to deploy agents. Say, no. That is not, even for VPNs, they were struggling to deploy these agents. I said, okay, the only way you can do this right now is to move these applications to the cloud. If you can move them to the cloud, then we can connect with CASB. Without that, you still have to deploy an agent, okay, on the desktops. They said even, okay, to deploy the agent on the desktop of corporate users, it's easier. But 60% of their users, they are going to be using their own computers. And nobody will allow you to deploy an agent on my own computer because I don't know what you're monitoring. So again, this question can be answered again, like I said, in two ways. If the organization, they have cloud applications like Office 365 or Azure AD where they publish their applications, and it's very simple. They deploy CASB to get the job done. And most of the SMBs today, they have CASB. So they have Office 365. Okay. Did I answer it different? Yeah. CASB.
Yes,
yeah.
it says. Yes, it says.
Yes. CASBI. Hi, Samuel.
CASB, hi.
Yes.
Cloud access. Oops, sorry, I'm doing that. Okay, Cloud Access Security Broker, CASB.
Thanks a lot. Felix, do you have some insight that you want to share?
Yes. So
Right.
I will look at, well, data dissemination or data loss basically works with, there's a solution I've seen, or the solution that we have, it's called Network Box. There are different modules that come with this solution. And when for example, things like, because it has different modules, and one of the modules actually deals with data leakage prevention, just like Sandy has mentioned. You can have the data leak prevention module directly linked to the AD, where you don't have to worry about the rules that apply on the AD still apply to you, even as you're working from home, because your machine is connected either through a VPN, which is also provided by the same provider. So if you are working or probably doing something on the office network, you're connected through the VPN, which is provided by the same provider, and then you have the data leakage prevention module within the same provider that makes you or enables you to work from home just like you're working from the office. Because you see, the limitation that we have, most of us, especially for the organization right now, is that they are not in control of the network at home for most of the staff that are working from home. So what most of the organization have tried to do is have a vast scale of dissemination of VPNs to most of the staff within the organizations. So these VPNs enables them to connect back to the organization, and they have an overview of who's connecting through the VPN. So one authentication through the VPN allows one to work as if they are in the office, but they're from home. And then the data leakage prevention, which is directly connected to the AD. I'm sorry, I'm being a bit technical here. Then goes ahead and makes sure that whatever data you're accessing through the network does not get out of, is not disseminated out in the wrong manner. So one of the ways that you can, or organization can help through this is either VPNs, having data leakage prevention systems, and if you have like what Sandy has mentioned, Office 365 solutions that are on the cloud, then the same solution can also be able to handle the same, but you can also go for CASB if you want. But there are so many solutions that can help you or can help an organization if they are working from home in terms of data security or data privacy or protection. So it will boil down now to what is the most what is the prevalence for the company? What solution do they want to put in place, and what infrastructure do they have in place that can be able to support that specific solution? So I would go with any of the solution that either Sandy has mentioned or I have mentioned. You can either settle for one, but there are so many solutions out there, even some of the Gartners that listed on the Gartner.
Very good.
You brought Gartner back into the conversation.
One word to what Felix just said. So it depends on the infrastructure. So like I said, if you have a cloud platform, Office 365, and you have cloud, stuff, CASB is your best bet. With CASB, no agents. You can do DLP and all that stuff with no agents. But if you don't have Office 365 and everything is on the corporate network, then you have to deploy agents. And I know some of the VPN solutions, their agent also can do DLP. I know that. You know why some? If they cannot do DLP, then you have to go and look for a solution that can do DLP. So it depends on the infrastructure.
Very well, guys, for that insight. And as we wrap up, just on a very generic kind of discussion, what are the future trends do you foresee shaping cybersecurity management, and more so during this period of the pandemic, and probably once we resume back to, we don't resume to a normal, we now conform to the new norm?
Okay, for me,
Sandy, start off.
Yeah, for me, the trend we're going to see is ransomware. Because that's where, the ransomware industry, if you will, it's an economy. It's an economy on its own. And you see a whole lot of different variants coming in. And you see, I always tell people, even though you have this, it is very, very simple and very, very easy to prevent. Very easy. 98%, if not 100%, of the ransomware that are being used for attack, they are operated. And according to Microsoft, they did a very, very cool, one of the very few occasions I really give thumbs up for Microsoft in security. They did very, very cool, research. Of course, from their research center, they brought a report. You can check that out. Microsoft reports on human-operated ransomware. Just Google it. It will bring that report out. 98% of those, they follow the same pattern. And what are those patterns? Irrespective of how the ransomware attacks you. So let me just show you something right here. You see that? Irrespective of how the ransomware comes, either it comes through phishing, which is the most popular, it can come through anything, they need to go to a process. And that process leverages on Active Directory to cause that damage. They need to steal credentials. they need to move laterally. So this is constant. And this is the reason why I said Active Directory security, hardening your Active Directory environment is key to breaking the chain from the adversary. So there's nothing you can do, you know, if you like, do users awareness from now till eternity. Human will always be human. Right? If God cannot help, how do you think you can help? God told the first folks, do not touch, do not. God gave supreme training. But what happened? They did. They were not only compromised, they were breached. That is why we're here today. So, what if that particular apple or something is not there? So what it means is that it doesn't matter the level of education you give to a user, a human. It cannot necessarily change his behavior. That's why we're human. If that were to be true, nobody will be smoking today. Despite the fact that you see smokers are liable to die young. Some medical doctors, they still smoke. That is human behavior. So ransomware is the next big thing. It will always be, because it gets the money faster to them. But again, this can be stopped. I mean, this can be prevented. All you need to do, focus on where they are coming to, not where they're coming from. You deploy the best of the AV training, blah, blah, blah. It will be bypassed. It's only a matter of time. When it's bypassed, what do they do? And that is why you see, finally, you see the next slide. Every attack that has ever happened, every that has ever happened, you see Active Directory, credential step, you see everything, APD35, even the latest that happened with Twitter, it happens Active Directory. Somebody stole credentials internally, he reset the password, he was able to move. Everything has to do with Active Directory. So once organizations are beginning to focus on having the security, not just monitoring now, you have some tools monitoring, auditing, that's great, but it's not full security. You need something that will harden the infrastructure, so much so that the bad guys get stranded. And that is, once the bad guys get stranded, that is where you as a defender, you've won. If somebody's in the bank, they want to commit a fraud, they need identity to do that thing. The bad guys, you want to attack you, ransomware, that ransomware, when it dropped to your network as a bad file, there's still credentials. They want that credentials to move laterally, you know, so everything. So what we're gonna see more and more and more right now is ransomware. And can this be prevented? Very, very okay. If you have the right mindset and you have the right methodology backed by the right technology, which is in this case, Active Directory security.
Very well, Sandy, and thanks for that insight, Felix.
Yes.
What do you foresee? Or you're in agreement with Sandy?
I fully agree with Sandy. Number one is ransomware. That one is, we are not taking it anywhere. I think that one is the new form of attack that's it's getting people money so fast, and I think it's really growing so fast to most of the organization. But then there are two other trends that are really coming up right now. One is insider threat. You see, like the Twitter hack that happened, it's an insider who actually meant for that attack to happen. And not just Twitter, I think that one forms the highest base of insider threat. But even on our normal organizations or institutions that we have, insider threat is highly growing. People within the organization or the staff themselves, trusted employees of the organization, are turning against the organization itself and selling it off to the cyber criminals. Now, this has really become a menace for most of the organization, because there's basically no way to detect an insider. A person cannot walk in through your organization's door and you say that's an insider threat, please take him out of the office. You really cannot do that. So insider threat is really growing, and there are very few measures that you can put in place for you to notice an insider threat. The only thing you can have in place to identify whether there is an inside threat is things to do with behavioral analytics, technology that deals with behavioral analytics. Because when someone changes how they act or how the activity within the organization, then that one can always be flagged. Again, insider threat comes in on another hand where you've not trained your people very well as an organization. So you find that a person just received a phishing email, and because they don't know it's a phishing email, they go ahead and click give out credentials. So those are the kind of, we normally call them an intentional insider. So we have both intentional and unintentional. So if a company is not keen on the people that work for them, the staff that work for them, then insider threat is really going to be a huge threat, and it's really growing each and every other day. My number two is most of the organization, as we speak, they're really moving towards the cloud. And there's this attack that's called cloud jacking, where the attackers are now targeting these cloud platforms. Now, remember, they're not targeting the cloud platform itself. They are targeting the users of the cloud platform, because the users have the credentials to the cloud platform. So if I can target a user, or basically create a replica of a cloud platform, then trick a user to get into there, it will be very easy for an attacker to get a whole cloud storage for a certain organization. So cloud jacking is really growing. And in as much as we are moving towards the cloud, Sandy mentioned that there is security of the cloud and there is security in the cloud, where the security for the cloud is basically meant for the organization. I think I am right. I hope I am right, Sandy. And I think that is where most of the attacks are really moving to. So we need to look at, number one, the cloud security that we are all moving into. We need to ensure that we are protecting it internally and also externally. I know that the providers of the cloud have done their best to secure, but the access to the same platform is through the users within the organization. And number two, the insider threat, really have good measures, pay your, the question about pay your staff well really spikes a lot of debate about how much you should pay them, but let your staff be comfortable when they're working, so that they don't one day turn against the organization. Train them, make sure that they know about cyber risks that are there, because at the end of the day, they form the first line of defense. They are the frontline workers of the organization, and they form the first firewall within the organization. If you don't train them, then your first line of defense of the organization is actually weak. So any other system that you have behind the people will also be breached, because the first line is weak. So those are the two things that I see growing very fast in the cybersecurity space. Thank you.
Very well, Felix.
Okay, great. I don't know if I can just use a few seconds to
go ahead, jump in.
Okay, great. Very good stuff Felix is talking about here. He talked about threat, he talked about cloud jacking. Now, if you listen carefully to what Felix has said, I heard him repeating credentials like 4 times. Credentials like 4 times, which dovetail back to what I said, Active Directory. Where are those credentials being managed? Active Directory. We talked about insider threat, and later on he was coming out and he was talking about users' behavior analytics. Again, Active Directory. For instance, there is an Active Directory platform that we have that once we deploy, after 3 weeks, we are able to profile the behavior of all the users. So for instance, I know the computers that Steve is logging in from. I know the computers, the servers that Steve is logging into. I know the services that Steve is accessing, either from the cloud or from on-premise. I know everything about Steve. I form the baseline. Now, after 3 weeks, if I see Steve's account trying to log on to Felix's account, I said this is suspicious. I'm going to hold that authentication, and I will send an MFA link to Steve's phone. I said, Steve, I see you're trying to log on to Felix's computer. Based on what we know about you, you've not logged on this computer before. So can you confirm if you are the one logging on here? And Steve has 3 options. Oh yeah, I'm the one. Once you click I'm the one, yes on the form, on the MFA, allowed. If it said no, I'm not the one, that means this transaction is no longer suspicious, but now fraudulent. because somebody has stolen his credentials and they want to move laterally, and we block the attack. We're not just going to alert, we block it. And the third option that has is if Steve ignores to either reject or approve this alert on the phone. After 2 minutes, we automatically block the connections on Steve's credentials to Felix's computer. So the adversary, the criminals, the insiders have gone rogue. They will always leave a trail. They will always leave a trail. Like Felix said, these guys, they will want to do what they are not used to, what is not normal. And again, everything is around the domain. So once you have this Active Directory hardened, you can get them very easily. Because if a bad guy wants to cause anything, they come through phishing, they've stolen your credentials, they now need to move laterally. So if I'm saying Steve's trying to access a service he has never accessed before, if I'm saying Steve trying to do something he has never done before, I'm not saying it's malicious, but I say, okay, wait a second, how can we connect? And that is why any organization without MFA, they will end up in the news faster than they think. Coming back to cloud jargon, like I say, security in the cloud. For you to sync up into the cloud infrastructure, you have to sync up with your Active Directory. So it is your Active Directory because you want to have a single sign-on that will link with these guys. In Azure AD, maybe you have like ADFS, you have like Azure AD, you have like SSOs, like Ping Federates or Okta, or all these SSOs that gives you a single sign-on. Everything is around credentials, guys, credentials. And that is why I say, for any attacker to be able to be successful, to breach you, it requires 3 things: credentials, privileges, and access. All these 3 are managed by the Active Directory. So once you concentrate your security on the Active Directory, irrespective of how the bad guys come in, it becomes very difficult for them to move, because you have hardened the Active Directory security, which is the focal point, the central nervous system of the network. That way, you disrupt, you slow down, you frustrate, and you irritate the bad guy. They get stranded. And that way, you have some level of security. So yes, these issues are there. Ransomware operated by a human. Insider threat, cloud jacking, everything centers around credentials, identity, and access. And once you focus on Active Directory to harden the Active Directory, then you have a better chance of getting these guys out and not ending in the news for the wrong reason.
Very, very well, Sandy, and I like that parting shot. Privileges, access, credentials. If you protect those 3, you're good to go, and all that is in the Active Directory. Thanks a lot, gentlemen, for your insights. Thanks to everyone who participated on this webinar. Grateful to have you here, and we look forward to hosting you again in the coming Friday, that is on the 7th of August. We'll be discussing about ICT investment, analysis, and business continuity management. Thanks a lot. Any other information or any other queries that you want to share to our panelists, or any other thing that you wish us to respond back to you, kindly do reach out to us using the contacts that we provided. Otherwise, for now, I'll say thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Sour.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you for the session.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.